Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome and thanks for logging on. Today, everything is for sale and in stock. If you like what you see, reach out to me. I am Team Mosso with thewatchbox.com, standing by for your email. We buy what we sell and we sell what we buy, which means we're always looking to build inventory. Sell us a watch, trade us a watch. We pay fast, cash. We walk you through the process. We make it a no-brainer, and there's no upper limit on cash paid. If you have an entire collection of Ferdinand Berthoud chronometers from the 18th century, we will buy them. To buy, trade, or sell, reach out to me. I am T. Mosso at thewatchbox.com. All right, let's get rolling with a watch that represents classical Rolex style. Now 70 years young in 2023, the Rolex Submariner has existed in two forms since the reference 1680 of the 60s. You have the Submariner and the Submariner date. Technically, there is nothing called a no date in the catalog. That is a term we use as collectors. The Submariner is the one without the date, and this is the latest Submariner. Reference 124060, 41 millimeters in stainless steel, as launched for 2020. It has a wonderful, super refined 120 click bezel with a sapphire capped bezel pearl. Not everyone has that attention to detail in the business. The sapphire cap protects it. Line it up with the minute hand, and you've got an impromptu 0 to 60 minute count up timer. Note all three hands loomed. That's great, because if you are diving in the dark or the depths, you need to know that your dive watch is still functional. Although this is technically a 41, it doesn't wear any larger than the old 40. It does, however, now have a 70-hour power reserve. That's the big mechanical upgrade for this generation. We still have the Rolex Glide Lock system, 20 millimeters of tool-free incremental adjustment. You could see the little stops, which are in 2 millimeter increments. So you can use it for fine-tuning the size, but you can also pull it out all the way to fit the watch over a dive suit. You can see you've got an intermediate sized link in there in case you still find yourself in between sizes. Screw down crown, 300 meters water resistant. Of course, this is a Rolex, so Rolex sports watch is still all solid case backs unless you're buying a precious metal Daytona. The watch wears beautifully on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, and I could recommend it for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. So that is just super cool. A lot of folks, however, think that you get better value when you shop Rolex's sister brand, which is Tudor. And so what we have right here is the 2022 Tudor Pelagos 39. So this is very similar to the No Date Sub, except as with other Pelagos models, it's made of titanium. 39 millimeters in diameter. It features a different pattern on the ceramic bezel. You can see how it has this lapping machine radial grain to give it a matte brushed finish. The dial is No Date, featuring, if you get close enough, solid applique blocks of lume. So those look printed, but they're not. They're solid bricks of lume that give the watch a cool three-dimensional aesthetic in the dark. You can also see all three hands loomed as on the sub, and these are the snowflake style hands as seen on Tudor Submariners in the late 60s through mid 70s period. You can also hear, if you have a particularly keen ear, that this watch has a remarkably vocal detent in a way that the sub does not. You can also see that it has a fully loomed bezel all the way around in a way that the sub does not. Now on the other side, we got something that was new on the Blancpain Pro GMT. So this is the new clasp, and it features the T-Fit system, which gives you 8 millimeters of tool-free adjustment in 1 millimeter increments. But not only do you get that, you get a full fold-out dive extension, so you get both. And the combination of both is really quite handy. You can also see Tudor using ceramic pin snaps so that the material doesn't wear down over time and lose the tight tolerances of its initial assembly. You'll find that as well inside the clamshell lock. So Tudor really thinking over the long term is these pin snaps can't be worn down by the titanium, so it will always remain snappy. Inside we have a movement originally created for the Blancpain 58, which is the 5400. It has all the tech specs of the bigger MT 5600 series. It's just thinner and smaller for these smaller watches. The watch is only 11.9 millimeters thick and 46.8 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip. So if you throw it on the wrist, you can see on my wrist it wears beautifully. This is actually suitable for a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference, and it comes with two straps in textile and rubber, so you do have an option to wear it on a strap if that aesthetic or fit suits you better. I think a lady could wear this, a guy could wear this, and it's an awesome alternative to something like a No Date Sub, or excuse a Submariner. Now, if you want to go upscale and a little bit more artisanal with your integrated bracelet sports watch, Girard-Perregaux' Laureato came out in 1975, which means it was part of the original bumper crop of these integrated bracelet sports watches, but that first one was quartz, whereas today they are mechanical. This came out in 2017. It is the Laureato skeleton, and frankly, you can just forget about the Royal Oak open-worked, because this gives you just as much. I would even argue it gives you more. Royal Oak open-worked, 50 meters water resistant. This, 100. Royal Oak open-worked. Frankly, dead even, a dead heat in terms of finish. The bevels, which you can see on the edge of the skeletonized movement, you can see the movement effectively one and the same as the dial. Look at those bevels. Look how mirrored they are. Look at the satination across the top. Look at the interior angles adjacent to the minute wheel. Take a look at that. Look how sharp they are and how many you get. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those sharp inward creases where bevels meet, all finished by hand. All screws, black polished. The base plate below these bridges, highly legible. The watch, designed to be seen, even in the dark. Impressive for a watch from the skeleton genre, which can be difficult to read lights on or lights off. We have a screw-down crown. This is a real sports watch. You can see the minute hand is hidden underneath there. We have a hacking seconds function. This is a caliber 1800 base, and you can see the open mainspring barrel allows you to see the coiling of the mainspring as you wind it. 54-hour power reserve. The movement's as impressive on the reverse side as it is on the dial side, and these are nice and thin, just over 10 millimeters thick. On the reverse, the rotor is a standout. You can see as handsomely and intricately finished as anything you'll get from Audemars Piguet. It features both mirrored bevels and satination. The back, well, everything has been opened up, and I can guarantee you it's as fine as any Geneva hallmark. Note the balance, which features recessed bolts to reduce the effect of the free airstream on timing, that is aerodynamic drag, and also to allow the micrometric timing adjustments to be done by changing the inertia of the balance. You'll also note this caliber 1800 is a bigger movement than the old GP 3300, so it fills the case back properly, and it looks fantastic on the wrist. You may have recently seen my video of the Girard-Perregaux triple-axis tourbillon, where I opine that GP finishes as well as anyone in the industry and better than most. Well, that's in evidence here. You can also see outstanding ergonomics with the edges of the case actually angled down and the bracelet super flexible to the extent that it can pull straight down out of the lugs without fighting and flaring out the way some integrated bracelets do. So this watch just fires on all cylinders. Superb, fitting under a cuff, wearing well on a small wrist, and fitting a treat on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. Okay, so something a little bit different here. It's sort of a sports watch in as much as it has a screw-down crown, automatic winding, loom, and an 80-meter water resistance. Take a look. It's even fairly well loomed. What is it? It's a watch that came out in the year 2000. It is the Blancpain Tourbillon Perpetual Calendar 8-Day, and it is all of those things. We have a flying tourbillon designed for Blancpain by Vincent Calabrese, black polished and beveled. You can see its construction means that there's no upper bridge to block your view. It is a flying tourbillon. We have the day, we have the date, we have the month, we have the leap year phase. It is a perpetual calendar. We have a power reserve indicator for 8 days of autonomy. We have a 38 millimeter case in white gold, wearable by anyone, and a movement caliber 5625 featuring extraordinary hand detailing, including a skeletonized and freehand engraved rotor. Take a look at the underside of the rotor, where the bridge for the winding system sits over a bridge that straddles the outer mountings of the tourbillon bridge. See how this is double layered? Each one of these 2 layers features mirrored anglage of the highest grade, and you can see the same on every bridge all the way around, with stripes across that winding rotor bridge, solarization, let's get the ratchet wheel visible, solarization on the ratchet wheel, as well as the crown wheel core, all screw heads black polished. You can see that the click spring has also been black polished. There's engine turning on the base plate, satination on the wheels. This is as good as it gets. And guys, this is a watch that you're going to be able to obtain for under $65,000. Think about that. Think about the value this represents. White gold, tourbillon, swimmable, automatic, loomed, power reserve indicator, 8-day power reserve, perpetual calendar, and again a flying tourbillon, not just any flying tourbillon, one designed by Vincent Calabrese for Blancpain, and even a lady's wrist could accommodate it, and it's low profile with a white metal case and a black dial. This is going to draw less attention than a yellow or Tiffany dial Rolex Oyster Perpetual. This is a watch for the connoisseur to enjoy. The kind of nerd who's going to ask you a question about this watch isn't going to ask you if it's real, whether you're rich, or how much it cost. He's going to ask you what it is and how in God's name you found something so scarce and so precious. He's going to ask you where he can get one, and you're going to tell him, I have no idea, because Team Mosso has been doing these videos for 9 years, and this is the first one he's seen. I've handled over 10,000 watches. This is the first of its kind in my experience. Is that rarity? You better believe it. By the way, in 2000, this was the first ever flying tourbillon 8-day power reserve perpetual calendar, which is still rarefied company today. Okay, JLC Polaris Memovox. Back in 1963, JLC started filtering out the first prototypes of its Polaris diving alarm. It reached series production in 1965, but not with the dial that would make it famous. That came in 1968, and it was the Polaris 68 that set the tone for the tribute to Polaris that came out in 2008. Truth be told, there were both versions, 65 and 68 dials, but the tribute to Polaris was mostly made with the 68 dial, and every version of the 2018 recreation was made with the Polaris 68 style dial. That said, this is a watch designed to envision what it would have been like if the Polaris had stayed in production, the way the Submariner stays in production, the way the Porsche 911 stays in production. The idea being, what would it look like if it had evolved into the modern era as a modern watch? So this is not a vintage re-edition, even though it does have a Fotina coloration. This is a answer to the question of what would a Polaris 68 look like had it evolved continuously, never discontinued, to the year 2018. Well, you would still have the bidirectional rotating internal dive bezel. You would still have the diving alarm. And as you can see on the reverse side, this 50th anniversary piece is exceptional. It's a limited edition of 1,000 pieces. It's 42 millimeters in diameter. It has a bubble-like cambered and boxed sapphire designed to give it the aesthetic of a vintage plexiglass. And because this is a modern-day dive watch, and it does meet the definition of a dive watch, it is fully loomed, including the disc that you can use to set the alarm. So why don't we now take care of that? I hope I wound it. You can wind it more, it can ring for longer, but you get the idea. This is a watch that you can even set from an alarm standpoint in the dark. It features the latest caliber 956 JLC Memovox caliber, which includes both quick set date and hacking seconds. It features a strap that is lovely and evocative of vintage straps, but very much a modern piece. We have a double deployant clasp here, and fun fact, it has a little push button quick release. You can pop the strap off without tools. You can actually get the buckle off the strap without tools. The watch wears well on my wrist. I think you could wear this on a wrist as small as a 15 centimeters circumference. The strap is exceptionally flexible, even though it is integrated. This is a good looking watch. Yes, it's a modern diver. Yes, it's a watch with a nod to antiquity, but it's not a retro re-edition. It's not a tribute watch. This is effectively the heart and soul of the JLC diving alarm, envisioned as though the continuity had never been broken. Okay, so you like Lume. I like Lume. Can you tell me what this is? Some of you are going to know, but I'm guessing that most of you are going to guess. Well, launched in 2022, this is the Patek Philippe Calatrava Pilot in white gold. Note that there is a hobnail case pattern in profile, and that the lugs, if you can look carefully, you can see that the lugs are not attached to the case band. They're attached to the case back. So you could slide a piece of paper between lug and case. And by creating a case band that's separate from the lugs, Patek's able to fashion this hobnail all the way around unbroken. We have sharp sharp, jutting, almost Carrera-like lugs, and a flat, conical bezel profile. The dial featuring a fumé fade, that is a smoked fade from light at the center to dark at the edge. Patek calls this dial textured charcoal, and if you get close, you can see it's got a little bit of a glossy gleam to it. It is textured. It's almost the texture of freshly paved asphalt. And then we have a lovely vintage evocative Fauxtina, which I like because it's a complementary color that prevents this white gold gray dial watch from being too frigid. This Fauxtina, along with the complementary color of the strap, it adds warmth that's much needed on this watch. Additional warmth added with those lovely and evocative syringe-style hands. We have the printing on the dial as well as the date disc in the same color as the Fauxtina, and I actually like that. That works out well. Note hacking seconds. We also have a quick set date function. This watch is powered by the latest Patek Philippe 26330 caliber, which you can see on the reverse side. Automatic winding, 4 Hz beat rate, anti-magnetic, free sprung, 6 position adjusted, nicely decorated, and per Patek, accurate to -3, plus 2 seconds a day. A wonderful suede nubuck style leather in calfskin, and we have a lovely spade-style white gold pin buckle. This watch is 40 millimeters in diameter. It's a little bit smaller than the similar 5326G annual calendar travel time. This is what I would call an all-arounder. Yes, theoretically, as a Calatrava, you could argue that it's a dress watch, but this doesn't feel formal. This doesn't feel stuffy. It's not pretentious. It's not something you need to wear a suit to enjoy. With its lume, its Arabic numerals, its white metal case, its gradient dial, the warmth of the patina, Fauxtina, this is a watch that you can wear with short sleeves as well as long, and wear casually as well as formally. That's why I call this an all-arounder. This Patek, however, is a little bit more formal. Launched in 2007, this is the 5159. This is the 5159J in yellow gold. Now, it's an officer's watch retrograde perpetual calendar. The officer's watch in the modern era dates back to 1989, when Patek Philippe released the 3960, and the idea there was that you had a watch that would pay homage to the conversions of the World War I era, when pocket watches were often converted to wrist watches because officers, generally in the trenches, needed both hands for combat, so they couldn't reach for their watch in a pocket. And oftentimes combat gear didn't have pockets. So by welding lugs onto a case and then using screws and bars to fix the strap, pocket watches were converted to wristwatches. So this is what that looks like in the modern era. Obviously much better crafted than a conversion, but you've got the same rotund case. You have the same evocative Roman numeral dial, a onion-style unbranded crown. You have those straight lugs that have been welded on, but welded on artisanally rather than haphazardly. Remember, welded lug case construction today is artisanal, low volume, and upscale. Welded lug case construction back during World War I tended to be a matter of practicality. Now, it does have a hunter case back because many pocket watches would have as well. Mechanically, it's got everything you just saw on the Calatrava Pilot, with the exception that this is not a hacking movement. That said, it features a perpetual calendar, which the Calatrava Pilot does not. So we have an aperture-style day, we have a retrograding date, we have an aperture leap year phase and month, and then actually a dial that is sort of off-white. It's not perfectly silver. It's got a little bit of an eggshell to it, which softens the blow of the yellow gold case, which can be a little bit harsh. This complementary cream works beautifully. We've got a sunray guilloche at center, and then a moon phase at the base. Note that the hour and minute hands have been blackened in gold, a really cool look. And though it is a 38, because of the shape of the lugs, it wears a little bit large. Take note that it's got a full deploying clasp. I would recommend you consider this more of like a 42 millimeter round watch in terms of how it wears, and consider the sizing based on how comfortable you are with a 42 millimeter round watch. And if you like this, but you want it a little bit smaller, get the 50 from 1998 to 2006. And by the way, if you're wondering why there was that hiccup, I ran out of space in the phone. So yes, there's a 5059, which we also have available, which is 36 millimeters, that gives you everything you see here, but in a smaller case size. If you want a rose gold perpetual calendar, but you don't want an antiquated look, you want something hyper modern but still warm and endearing, how about the Audemars Piguet Code 1159 perpetual calendar? When the Code 1159 debuted in 2019, it was very controversial because particularly with the automatic and chronograph models, the dials, which were expensively made, unfortunately looked rather flat, featureless, and cheap. The problem was not in evidence on the perpetual calendar, which most folks regarded as pretty close to perfect from the very beginning. And the number one reason for that, the aventurine dial. This is an aventurine glass dial. We'll get close and take a quick look, and you'll appreciate just how deep it is. Aventurine glass is a vitreous enamel, a dark translucent blue that is then impregnated with metallic elements, which is wonderful because the moon phase cosmos blends almost seamlessly with the dial of the watch. Hands, indices, rose gold. Perpetual calendar. But we also have a weekly calendar, so you get the day, date, month, leap year, and the week of the year with a moon phase that has a photorealistic moon phase, and the wonderful Code 1159 case, which has these open, airy, buttress-like lugs, and you can see that they've been beveled internally, they've been beveled externally, that the case band is complex. It's a rounded octagon in tribute to the royal oak, and we have these little recessed profiles that have been faceted and polished, plus the bezel, the case back, and the mid case read as different pieces. You'll also appreciate that the strap is fixed to the case using screws and bars, and that the screws are hexagonal, another nod to Audemars Piguet's most famous product. You can see that there is a distinct cambered cant to the sapphire that's most evident when you view it from 6 o'clock or from 12 o'clock. It has almost a dihedral profile to it that creates wonderful distortion and prismatic effects. The watch, of course, a perpetual calendar powered by Audemars Piguet, caliber 5134, based on the 2120, which is itself based on the JLC 920 Bausch. This is a time-honored movement, no longer available in the jumbo, mostly because AP wants to crank out jumbos, and this slow-going movement, which takes a long time to make and finish, wasn't as amenable to mass production as the newer 7121. But that's good. You want this movement because it takes more time and effort to make. It has a beryllium ring that runs all the way around. That's how the winding rotor is able to shrink super close to the bridges and plates with no danger of actually contacting them under impact or concussion. Because you have this beryllium ring that is mounted on 4 ruby roller bearings, this can never compress or sink sufficiently to hit the bridges or plates. The beveling is the biggest part that makes this movement slow to produce, because here it's truly hand-finished and mirrored. On the newer 7121, it's not. You can also see a free-sprung Gyromax style balance, although this movement is distantly JLC based. Audemars Piguet made a lot of upgrades and now builds and finishes this movement in-house. In fact, it has for a long time. That's why changes like the free-sprung balance have been added. You can also see that we have exceptionally broad and luminous stripes. Next to the beveling, the stripes are the second most appealing part of the 2120 movement family, and you can see on this 5134 they're exceptionally broad and luminous with a real shading gradient from one side to the other. You can also see that all of the jewel and screw sinks have been internally beveled. We've got solarization on the ratchet wheel as well as the crown wheel core, engine turning on the base plate, and we've got satination on the wheels. It is a truly great looking movement. It beats away at a vintagey 19,800 vibrations per hour because after all the JLC 920 was designed for Patek, Vacheron, and Audemars Piguet, launching in 1967, only ever used by those 3 brands and never by JLC or any of its other customers. But it did come out in the 60s, hence the quirky beat rate. It's got an automatic winding 40-hour power reserve. It wears large, although a 41mm watch, my experience is it's really more like a 42 or a 43 because it's 50 millimeters from lug to lug. And while it's thinner than you think it is, it's still not ultra thin. So it's a large watch. I would wear it on a wrist my size or larger. That's my guidance for wearing one of these 41mm Code 1159s. All right, so where do we finish up this episode? Well, how about with a watch that has plenty to say? This is the Lange und Söhne Zeitwerk striking, and as you might have suspected, the Zeitwerk striking will strike on the hours and the quarters, and it is a watch that was Lange's first tentative step into the world of striking complications. Of course, the Zeitwerk, launched in 2009, won the GPHG Egidol as the best watch in the industry for that year. Impressive for an East German-made watch to win at that Geneva institution. And 2 years later, the Zeitwerk striking was released. It's a bigger case. This is, of course, 44 millimeters in diameter. The standard Zeitwerk is 42, but the extra space is put to good use with gongs that run circumferentially as well as strikers that are visible on the dial side. And I'll show you how to operate them at will. Here you get the charismatic triple jump and the strike. When you activate and deactivate the system, you can actually silence it, but you can make it chime if you wish. Now, turning it all over, the movement based on the L043, this is the L0432, we have a stop work, so the watch will stop when it lacks enough mainspring energy to jump the minute display. We have this little locking lever and a steel bridge that acts as a remontoire d'égalité constant force device, because the mainspring in this watch is so mighty and powerful. One side of it's actually anchored to the base plate, so it would have enough power to overdrive and break the escapement. So you have first the jump of the minutes, then a little pinwheel that acts as an air brake, slows down the transmission and bleeds off some of the energy. The energy is transferred through this locking lever to a hairspring that sits between two third wheels, and that hairspring takes in 1 minute worth of energy. So that hairspring always drives the escapement rather than having the barrel drive the escapement directly. As a result, you have constant force, and despite the huge amount of energy, very little fluctuation in balance amplitude. 5-position adjusted like a chronometer. You can see we have 2, not 1, freehand engraved half bridges, plenty of black polish, everything that's turning black, everything reflective turning black as I cant it through the light, that is black polish. That's what I'm talking about there. We have an overcoil hairspring, which is not something found universally on Lange watches. And you can see it does feature hacking seconds with a free sprung balance, and then all of the adjustments done, with the exception of very small adjustments using the swan's neck. Most of the timing adjustments are done using these variable inertia bolts. The finishing is world class. The German silver of the bridges and plates giving it a lovely golden hue. We have stripes across the bridges, mirrored anglage on their sides. We have both polished screws and blued screws, fired blue screws, stripes across the bridges. We have snailing across the cap of the barrel. We have solarization on the ratchet wheel as well as the crown wheel core. And you can see the steel bridge has been satinated on its top and beveled on its sides with engine turning on the base plate. This is about as good as it gets. And again, it has a full deploying clasp. That's something that really sets it apart, as most Lange watches do not have those. If you love the watches you just saw, reach out to me. Remember, I am Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.